He was just a kid from the office, stuck with her in a broken elevator. When she whispered, "You see me, don't you?" his world tilted. What she did next would haunt him forever. I remember that day like it was etched into my mind with a fine-point pen, every detail sharp and unrelenting, refusing to fade even years later. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-July, and the heat in downtown Seattle was oppressive, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every breath feel labored. The sun beat down on the glass facades of the buildings along Elliott Avenue, turning the street into a shimmering haze, while inside the sleek tower of Nexus Innovations, the air conditioning struggled to keep up. I was 23, fresh out of college with a marketing degree clutched like a lifeline, and I'd been at the firm for just over 6 months. Still green, still proving myself in a world of polished professionals. I carried my laptop like armor, my presentation on user engagement metrics rehearsed to the point of exhaustion. The office was a buzz of keyboards and murmured conversations, but all I could think about was nailing that meeting on the 14th floor. Stepping into the elevator, I nodded politely to the woman already inside, her presence filling the small space with a quiet authority. Renata Hale, project manager in operations, late 30s, maybe 38, with that poised elegance that comes from navigating corporate storms without a ripple. Her dark hair was pulled into a neat bun, strands escaping just enough to soften her sharp features, and her hazel eyes held a depth that made you feel seen, truly seen, in a way that was both comforting and unnerving. She wore a tailored blouse and slacks, the fabric clinging slightly in the humidity, and that subtle ring on her finger spoke of commitments I could only guess at. We'd crossed paths before, brief hellos in the break room, a nod during all-hands meetings, but nothing more. She was the type who mentored without fanfare, efficient and no nonsense, yet there was always something guarded about her, like a story half told. "Good afternoon, Harlan," she said, her voice smooth and measured, as the doors slid shut with a soft whoosh. She reached for the panel, pressing the button for the 16th floor, where her office overlooked the bustling sound below. "Afternoon, Renata," I replied, shifting my laptop under my arm, the weight suddenly feeling heavier. The elevator lurched upward, the hum of its machinery a familiar backdrop to the awkward silence that settled between us. I stared at the glowing floor numbers, willing them to climb faster, while she glanced at her phone, her thumb scrolling absently. Then, between the 8th and 9th floors, everything changed. A sharp jolt rocked the car, the lights flickering wildly as if protesting the intrusion. The elevator groaned to a halt, a mechanical sigh echoing in the confined space, and I grabbed the handrail, my heart slamming against my ribs. Renata steadied herself against the wall, her phone slipping from her fingers and skittering across the floor with a clatter that seemed too loud in the sudden stillness. "What the hell was that?" I muttered, more to break the tension than anything, my voice echoing slightly off the walls. The emergency lights kicked in, bathing us in a dim, amber glow that cast long shadows and made the space feel even smaller, more intimate. Renata bent down gracefully to retrieve her phone, her movements calm, deliberate, as if this were just another minor hiccup in her day. "Looks like we're stuck," she said, straightening up with a faint sigh. She pressed the emergency button firmly, holding it until a voice crackled through the intercom, distorted but reassuring. "Building maintenance, Javier speaking. What's the situation?" "Elevator 3, halted between 8 and 9, Renata responded, her tone authoritative yet composed. "2 passengers inside. No injuries." "Got it," Javier replied, static hissing in the background. "Power fluctuation across the block. Grid issue. Team's on it, but it could take a while. You both all right?" "We're okay," I added, though my pulse was still racing, adrenaline sharpening every sense. "How long are we talking? 20 minutes, maybe more?" "Hang tight. We'll keep you posted." The intercom clicked off, leaving a ringing silence. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing, the metal cool through my shirt. Stuck in an elevator. Of all the cliches, this one felt too real, too confining. But at least I wasn't alone. Renata's presence was a strange anchor, her calm demeanor rubbing off on me just a bit. She slid her phone into her pocket and crossed her arms, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Well, this derails the afternoon nicely," she said, her voice laced with dry humor that eased the knot in my chest. "You were heading to that metrics meeting, weren't you?" "Yeah," I nodded, surprised she remembered the details from a casual chat weeks ago. "Slides are ready, but I guess they'll wait. What about you?" "Clients sync with Tokyo. They'll reschedule." She leaned back, her shoulder brushing the wall, and for a moment our eyes met longer than necessary, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. The air was already warming, the ventilation system wheezing faintly, and I could catch the subtle floral scent of her perfume. Jasmine, maybe, fresh and lingering. We filled the time with small talk at first, the kind that bridges awkward gaps. I mentioned my weekend plans, a hike up near Snoqualmie Pass with old college buddies, the trails winding through misty forests that promised escape from the city's grind. She shared that she'd grown up in Portland, drawn to Seattle by her husband's career, though now it was her own path keeping her here. Her voice softened when she spoke of him, but there was a hesitation, a door cracked open but not inviting entry. "It's a good life," she said, but the words hung with an undertone I couldn't quite place. Minutes stretched, 10, 15, and the conversation deepened, almost without permission. She asked about my family, and I found myself opening up more than I intended. My parents' messy divorce when I was 13, the way it left me cautious, always second-guessing connections. At 23, I'm still piecing it together, I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck, feeling exposed under the dim light. Feels like everyone's got a roadmap except me. She smiled faintly, those fine lines around her eyes adding a warmth that made her seem approachable, human. 23, she echoed, her gaze thoughtful. I was already married by then, convinced I had it all figured out. But life, it unravels things you thought were set. Her words carried a quiet weight, and in the pause that followed, the air shifted, growing thicker with unspoken histories. The heat built steadily, making my shirt stick to my skin, and Renata unbuttoned her blouse's top button, fanning herself with a hand. "This warmth is unrelenting," she murmured, her cheeks flushed slightly. I averted my eyes, focusing on the panel, but my mind wandered to the curve of her collarbone, the way vulnerability peeked through her poise. Another 20 minutes dragged by. My phone showed no signal, a dead brick in my pocket. Renata tried the intercom again, her voice steady as Javier updated us. The outage was widespread, tied to a substation failure. "Sveta from reception is out on errands," he added casually. "Won't be back for at least 2 hours. Lobby's empty for coordination." Renata relayed it to me in a whisper, even though we were utterly alone. "Sveta won't be back for 2 hours." The words landed softly, but they echoed, stretching the weight into something more profound, more unavoidable. 2 hours, in this box, cut off from the world. It felt like an eternity. We lowered ourselves to the floor, backs against opposite walls, our knees nearly touching in the narrow confines. The dim light softened her features, making her look both timeless and weary, and I found myself studying her. The way her hands folded in her lap, fingers twisting her ring absent-mindedly. We delved deeper into talk, office frustrations, the relentless deadlines that sapped the soul, how she balanced her team's demands with upper management's whims. "You've got real potential, Harlan," she said, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist. "Don't let this place dim that spark too soon." "Thanks," I replied, a warmth spreading that had nothing to do with the temperature. As she adjusted her position, her hand brushed mine, accidental, fleeting, but the contact lingered in my mind, a spark in the stillness. It was nothing, I told myself, just circumstance. Yet in this suspended reality, it felt charged, like the first crack in a facade. The first hour crept past, and the dialogue turned even more personal. She confided about her marriage, how routines had replaced sparks, her husband Derek's constant travel leaving echoes in their home. "It's like coexisting sometimes," she said, her voice a hushed confession. "You forget what it means to be truly noticed, to feel that pull." I shared my own stumbles, failed dates that left me hollow, the loneliness of a new city. "I'm not chasing serious yet," I admitted. "But it creeps in, that emptiness." Her nod was understanding, her expression mirroring a shared ache. Silence fell then, thick and electric. I heard her breathing, steady yet quickened, and my own heart echoed it. Glances at her lips, the graceful line of her neck. I pushed the thoughts away, reminding myself of the gaps, her age, her ring, our roles. But the elevator held us captive, weaving an invisible thread. The intercom buzzed again. Javier with more delays, another hour at minimum. Renata groaned softly, head tilting back, exposing her throat in a gesture that stirred something deep. Her eyes met mine, a spark igniting. She reached out, fingers grazing my arm. "You holding up?" "Yeah," I said, voice rougher than planned. "And you?" She held my gaze, unspoken words hanging between us. "This is only the beginning. You can't even imagine what she will decide in a few hours." The air in the elevator thickened, heavy with more than just the July heat pressing against us. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, amplifying every sound. The faint hum of the ventilation, the rustle of Renata's blouse as she shifted, the unsteady rhythm of my own breath. I was 23, still navigating the edges of who I was meant to be, and here I was, trapped in this metal box with Renata Hale, a woman whose presence seemed to pull the world into sharper focus. Her hazel eyes caught the dim emergency light, glinting with a mix of curiosity and restraint, and her dark hair, loosened now from its bun, framed her face in soft waves. She was probably 39, maybe 40, her poise carrying the weight of years I couldn't yet fathom. Yet there was a fragility in her gaze that made her feel closer, more reachable than I'd ever expected. We sat on the floor, knees almost brushing, the narrow space forcing a proximity that felt both accidental and inevitable. My shirt clung to my back, damp from the rising warmth, and I noticed a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead, making her look less like the polished project manager and more like someone caught in a moment of raw honesty. The silence between us wasn't empty. It crackled, charged with the weight of what we weren't saying. Her fingers rested near mine on the cool floor, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. I told myself it was just the situation. Two people stuck, making the best of it. But my pulse told a different story. "So," she said, her voice low, cutting through the quiet like a blade. "What's the worst thing you've ever done, Harlan?" Her tone was light, almost playful, but her eyes held a challenge as if she were peeling back a layer to see what lay beneath. I laughed, the sound rough with nerves, rubbing my palms on my jeans to ground myself. "The worst? Tough call. Stole a candy bar from a gas station off I-5 when I was 12. Thought I was some master thief until my mom found the wrapper in my pocket." I glanced at her, expecting a chuckle, but her lips curved into a thoughtful smile, her gaze steady. "That's it? A candy bar?" she teased, leaning forward slightly, her elbow resting on her knee. "Come on, you've got something better than that." I grinned, emboldened by her tone. "All right, fine. Freshman year at UW, I snuck into a frat party on University Way. Got so drunk I passed out in their backyard, woke up soaked from their sprinklers at dawn. Swore I'd never show my face on that street again." The memory felt childish now, but her soft laugh, warm and unforced, made it worth sharing. "That's more like it," she said, her voice softening, her eyes crinkling with amusement. "You're not as innocent as you seem, Harlan Voss." She tilted her head, studying me, and the air shifted, growing denser. "Your turn. What's mine?" I hesitated, my boldness wavering. Asking her felt like stepping onto thin ice, but the intimacy of the moment pushed me forward. "Okay. What's your worst?" I kept my tone light, but my heart thudded, loud enough I worried she could hear it. She looked away, her fingers tracing the hem of her blouse, the gesture small but deliberate. For a moment, I thought I'd overstepped, that she'd retreat behind her professional mask. Then she spoke, her voice quieter, laced with something raw. When I was 24, I was engaged. Nice guy, steady, the kind everyone said was perfect for me. But one night, at a bar in Portland, I kissed his best friend. Not because I loved him, just because I was restless, chasing something I couldn't name. She paused, her eyes meeting mine, unguarded. I never told my fiancé. We got married a year later. Sometimes I think that choice, it set the tone for everything after. The confession landed like a stone, rippling through the stillness. I didn't know what to say, didn't dare ask about her marriage, about what everything after meant. Her ring glinted faintly, a silent barrier between us, yet her openness felt like a bridge. That's not so bad, I said, trying to lighten the mood, though my voice betrayed my unease. We all mess up when we're young. Young, she echoed, a faint smile tugging at her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. You're still there, aren't you? That age where every choice feels like it could change everything. She shifted, her knee brushing mine now, and neither of us moved away. The contact was subtle but electric, a current running through the confined space. Maybe, I admitted, leaning forward, elbows on my knees, trying to ignore the way her proximity made my skin hum. But it doesn't always feel like that. Sometimes it's like I'm just waiting for something to shake me awake. Her gaze softened, and she slid closer, her knee pressing against mine now. Deliberate or not, I couldn't tell. Waiting's a dangerous game, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You never know what'll show up when you least expect it. The words hung heavy, and I felt my chest tighten. The elevator was a pressure cooker now, the heat wrapping around us, amplifying every glance, every breath. Her fingers fidgeted with her ring, twisting it absently, and I wondered what it meant, if it meant anything at all. The dim light cast shadows across her face, softening the lines of her years, making her seem both timeless and achingly present. Tell me something else, I said, desperate to keep this connection alive, to fill the silence before it swallowed us. Something nobody knows about you. Her eyebrows lifted, a spark of amusement breaking through the tension. Bold move, Harlan, she said, her voice teasing but warm. Nobody's asked me that in, God, years. She leaned her head back against the wall, exposing the graceful curve of her neck, and I forced myself to focus on her words, not the way her blouse clung to her in the heat. All right. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a painter, not just sketching, real, soul-on-canvas stuff, the kind that hangs in galleries in Paris or Florence. I'd spend hours mixing colors in my room, dreaming of a life that felt bigger. But life got practical. I haven't touched a brush in over a decade. That's kind of heartbreaking, I said, the words slipping out before I could soften them. You should paint again, Renata. You've got time. Her smile was wistful, her eyes searching mine. Time, she repeated, as if tasting the word. Maybe. What about you? What's your secret dream? I swallowed, caught off guard. Nobody asked me things like that, not with the kind of attention she was giving me, like my answer mattered. I write, I confessed, my voice quieter than I intended. Short stories mostly about people like me, lost in cities, chasing connections that don't quite stick. They're hidden in a notebook under my bed, like I'm still some kid scared of being caught. Her smile widened, genuine and warm, and it made my chest ache. That's beautiful, Harlan. You should share them someday. Let someone see that part of you. Maybe, I said, my throat tight. Then, before I could stop myself, maybe you. The words hung there, reckless and raw. Her eyes widened, but she didn't look away. Instead, she leaned forward, just a fraction, her breath catching. Careful, she murmured, But there was no reprimand in her tone, just a quiet intensity that made my stomach flip. Her hand shifted, fingers brushing mine deliberately now, and the contact sent a jolt through me, sharp and undeniable. The intercom crackled, shattering the moment. "Still working on it," Javier's voice came through, apologetic. "Power's flickering, but the elevator system's stubborn. Another 40 minutes, maybe. You good?" "We're fine," Renata called back, her voice steady, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. When the intercom clicked off, she didn't move, didn't break the connection. The air was thick now, heavy with possibility, and I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and unsteady. She reached out, her hand resting fully on mine, her fingers warm and sure. "You're different, Harlan," she said, almost to herself. "Not like the others here. You see things." I didn't know what she meant, not entirely, but the way she said it made my pulse race. I wanted to ask, to understand what she saw in me, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I mirrored her, my hand turning to clasp hers, our fingers intertwining. The space between us felt like a chasm and a bridge all at once. The elevator hummed faintly, the lights flickering as if teasing us with movement. But it stayed still, and so did we, caught in this fragile moment. Her knee pressed against mine, a steady warmth, and she murmured, "This is a strange day. I didn't expect any of this." "Me neither," I said, my voice rough with honesty. I held her gaze, and for the first time I saw something raw in her eyes. Loneliness, maybe, or a longing that mirrored my own, the kind that creeps up when you've been running on empty too long. The silence stretched, charged with unspoken questions. Her fingers tightened around mine, and I wondered if she felt the same pull, the same reckless urge to cross a line we both knew was there. What he says next will change everything. For her, and for him. Our fingers touched then, not by accident this time, but with a deliberate slowness that made my skin tingle, a quiet admission in the midst of the elevator's stifling warmth. Renata's hand was warm, her palm soft against mine, and for a split second we both held still, the contact sending a subtle wave through me, like the first drop of rain before a storm. I looked at her, taking in the details I'd overlooked in our office encounters, the faint freckles dusting her nose, the way her chest rose and fell in rhythm with breaths that seemed to quicken, matching my own unsteady pace. At 23, I'd navigated crushes and fleeting connections, but this felt deeper, more layered, like wandering into a conversation that had been waiting for me all along. She was around 40, her presence carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd built a life brick by brick. Yet in this dim light, there was a vulnerability in her eyes that made the years between us feel both vast and irrelevant. "Harlan," she whispered, her voice a blend of warning and invitation, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Her fingers didn't retreat. Instead, her thumb traced a light circle over my knuckles, a gesture so intimate it stole my breath. I felt my throat constrict, words bubbling up and dissolving before they could form. The air was thick with the scent of her jasmine perfume, mingled with the faint metallic tang of the elevator, and the emergency lights cast a golden hue over her features, softening the edges of her guarded expression. "I don't know what this is," I said at last, my voice low and raw, cutting through the hum of the ventilation. "But it's real, isn't it? Not just the heat or the weight." She held my gaze, her hazel eyes reflecting a storm of thoughts, hesitation, curiosity, perhaps a flicker of the same pull I felt. At 41, she let it slip earlier with a wry smile as if testing the air. She carried experiences that dwarfed my own. A marriage, a career forged through compromises and quiet battles. Her wedding ring pressed lightly against my skin as our hands stayed linked, a tangible reminder of the boundaries we were skirting. Yet in this suspended space, those lines blurred, fading under the weight of the moment. "Maybe it is," she replied softly, her fingers weaving more firmly with mine, creating a tentative bridge. Or maybe it's the cabin fever talking, making us see things that aren't there. But her words lacked conviction, her tone carrying a quiet surrender instead. We sat like that for what felt like an eternity, hands clasped on the floor between us, the elevator's walls seeming to lean in closer, turning our confinement into something almost protective. The outside world, my forgotten presentation, her client calls, the bustling office floors above and below, felt distant, irrelevant, like echoes from another life. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze, drawing me back from my swirling thoughts. "Tell me more about those stories of yours," she said, shifting the ground beneath us. But her touch remained steady, an anchor in the uncertainty. "What draws you to writing about loneliness in the city?" I paused, surprised by how easily the words came now, as if her openness had unlocked something in me. "It's what I know best," I admitted, my free hand gesturing vaguely in the dim space. "Moving here from Tacoma, starting this job, it's all shiny on the surface, but underneath it's isolating. People rushing past, building walls without realizing it. My stories are about those moments when someone breaks through, even if it's just for a night." I glanced at our joined hands, the irony not lost on me, and felt a warmth creep up my neck. Her smile was sad, knowing, as she nodded slowly. "Sounds familiar. I used to think marriage would fix that. Stability. Someone always there. But it turns out you can be in the same room and still feel miles apart." She paused, her thumb still tracing patterns on my skin, and her voice dropped lower. "Derek's a good man, travels for work, keeps things steady, but we don't connect like this anymore. It's all schedules and silences. I miss feeling truly seen, like I'm more than just part of the routine." The confession wrapped around me like a vine, pulling me deeper into her world. I wanted to offer something wise, to say she deserved that spark, but all I managed was, "You are seen, Renata. Right here, right now. You're alive in a way that matters." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with a depth of emotion that mirrored my own confusion, my own longing. She leaned forward slightly, closing the gap between us, and the air grew even heavier, charged with unspoken possibilities. I could feel the heat from her body, the subtle rise and fall of her breathing, and my mind raced with reasons to pull back. The age difference that made me feel like a kid playing at adulthood, her ring symbolizing commitments I had no right to challenge, the office dynamics that could turn this into a mess. But none of it mattered. The pull was stronger, a quiet force drawing us in. Without a word, I raised my other hand, hesitating before gently cupping her cheek. Her skin was warm, flushed from the heat, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she closed her eyes briefly, leaning into my touch as if it were a balm she'd been craving. "Harlan," she murmured, her voice cracking just a fraction. "We can't. This isn't right." "I know," I whispered, but my hand stayed, thumb brushing away a stray bead of sweat from her temple. Her free hand came up to cover mine, holding it there, and the gesture felt like permission, like a shared secret. The elevator jolted slightly, not a full restart, but a tremor that made us both tense, the lights brightening for a heartbeat before dimming again. It was a reminder that this bubble could burst any second, yet we lingered, caught in the tension. We talked more then, words flowing in a steady stream as if the physical connection had opened a floodgate. She shared stories of her younger days, backpacking through Europe after college, sketching ancient ruins in Rome under a relentless sun, moments of freedom before life demanded practicality. Her voice painted vivid pictures, her laughter soft and genuine when I recounted my own misadventures, like getting lost in the Cascades last summer, stumbling back to camp hours late with nothing but blisters and stories. "You make it sound fun," she said, her hand still in mine, fingers intertwined now with a familiarity that belied our short time together. As the embrace of our conversation deepened, She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing mine, and I felt the tension in her ease, her body relaxing against the wall. "This feels good," she admitted quietly, pulling back just enough to meet my eyes. "Too good, maybe." Our faces were inches apart, breaths mingling in the warm air, and I could see the conflict etched in her features, the want clashing with the weight of what-ifs. "Yeah," I agreed, my voice thick with the same turmoil. My hand moved from her cheek to the nape of her neck, fingers tangling gently in her loosened hair. She caught her breath, her eyes searching mine. And for a moment, the world narrowed to just us, the hum of the elevator fading, the heat becoming secondary to the fire building inside. The elevator shuddered again, more insistently this time, but we ignored it, lost in the gravity of the moment. Her forehead rested against mine, a silent communion, and she whispered tales of quiet regrets, of nights spent wondering if this was all life had to offer. I shared my fears, the pressure to succeed fast, the doubt that I wasn't enough for this world. And she listened, her touch a steady reassurance. Then, slowly, deliberately, she tilted her head, her lips brushing mine in the softest of kisses. A question wrapped in tenderness. It was light at first, tasting of salt and shared vulnerability, and I responded with equal care, my heart thundering as if trying to escape my chest. The kiss deepened gently, her hands framing my face, mine lost in her hair, but it wasn't about urgency. It was a quiet exploration, an acknowledgement of the bond we'd woven in this unlikely space. Yet as it lingered, she pulled back, her breathing ragged, eyes wide with the reality crashing in. "We can't do this," she said, her voice trembling, though her hands stayed on me, reluctant to let go. "It's not fair. To you, to me, to everything." I nodded, the taste of her still on my lips, a bittersweet echo. "I know. But it happened anyway." The intercom buzzed sharply, Javier's voice breaking through like cold water. "Good news. Power's stabilizing. We'll have you moving in 5 minutes. Sorry for the long haul." Renata composed herself quickly, smoothing her blouse and hair with efficient motions, her professional mask slipping back into place. But when her eyes met mine one last time, there was a softness, a shared understanding that lingered. "Thank you," she murmured, "for listening, for making this bearable." "Thank you," I echoed, standing as the elevator hummed to life, the floors beginning to shift. The doors parted on the 9th floor, maintenance crew waiting with tools and apologies, the cool lobby air rushing in like a wake-up call. We stepped out into the fluorescent lights, the real world reclaiming us, phones vibrating with missed notifications, colleagues casting curious glances as they passed. Renata gave me a final nod, her expression